Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Daniel Negreanu. He's a Canadian professional poker player who's won 8 World Series of Poker bracelets and 2 World Poker Tour championships over the course of his 30-year career. He's incredibly entertaining, and I reached out to him because I've gotten into poker because it's kind of fun to watch on the YouTube, and he was gracious enough to swing by my channel, and we talk about his life and experience in the game of poker and the game of life. And you can find links to his work down there in the description, as well as links to support this channel. Without further ado, here is Daniel Negreanu. How's your year been?
Been a great year. Yeah. Like essentially the best year of my life in a lot of ways.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the high points?
Well, World Series summer was as good as it could be.
Yeah.
And more importantly, we're expecting our first child finally.
Really?
Yeah. Healthy, playing golf, loving life.
Yeah. When did you start with the golf? Has that always been?
I started in my early 30s.
Okay.
But, in the last, 4 or 5 years, we moved to Las Vegas and I live next to a course.
Yeah.
So I've been playing a lot more.
Yeah. I see some of your content is devoted to that.
For sure. Yeah.
Is it what's the mindset different than the other game you play, the poker thing?
Well, there's a lot of similarities actually, because with poker, you can sort of do everything right and not get the results you're looking for.
Yeah.
That can happen in golf. It's not as prevalent. Luck doesn't play as big of a role, but sometimes you get a bad bounce. You hit a great shot, hit a bad bounce, it just kicks left and goes in a bunker or something like that. Or land in a divot, But I think the similarities really come down to, just focus, being able to focus at a high level, whether you're doing an activity like golf or, intense mental sport like poker.
Poker involves a lot of stress and strategy and psychology, and doing it for 30 years as you have, I'm sure that you've been tested in a variety of ways. What do you think it takes for someone to stay in the game this long and not let it, twist them this way or that?
I think in order to be successful at poker, it requires resilience. And one of the ways that you develop resilience is to be tested, right? Mm-hmm. So poker will test you. Poker will check. Poker will determine who you really are. How strong, how mentally tough are you, right? Because those that are not strong enough, they fall by the wayside. Mm-hmm. But poker is not a game similar to some of the other vices, playing slot machines or whatever. Those are about instant gratification. They're not really all that strategic. They're just a need to fill, sort of a gambling addiction, if you will. Poker's more strategic, obviously, and it is a game that you can win at. But because there's luck involved, there's added confusion and frustration, right? Okay, you won a couple times. Now you think you're good. You might have played terribly, but just got lucky. But now you're delusional. And now you think you're really good. So now you keep playing. And now, reality sets in. And now you start losing. You think, what the hell's going on? You know what I mean? Now you're upset because you feel like, you're unlucky or something like that. When the truth is, you were just, because you had early luck, you became delusional about how good you are or how bad you are.
Yeah.
The true professionals look at situations and go, okay, all right, well, let me dissect the hand. Did I play this well? Did I make all the right decisions? And you're able to separate yourself from the result of what happened, right? You put all your money in with a pair of aces. That's the best hand you can. You lose to a guy with a 9 and a 6. Okay, well, fine. Now, did you play the hand correctly? Did you make all the right decisions? If so, continue to do that and having the faith that the results will come as long as you keep making good decisions.
How conscious are you of the amount of self-control, or how much of your attention is spent hiding your own tells rather than investigating others or playing with others? How aware are you of your own behavior and how you could be coming off to other people, especially within the context of the game?
Yeah. I am, depending on who I'm playing with, right? So certain players don't really spend any time looking at you or trying to read you in those kind of ways. With those types of players, I'm pretty lax and I'm much more talkative and try to confuse them. But if I'm playing against somebody who's very sharp, a high limit player who knows, who will see through this stuff, I realize I give stuff away, right? The more I talk, the more, a sharp player will figure out whether or not I'm strong or I'm weak, in this spot. So for example, if I'm playing with Phil Ivey, I don't say anything. I just kind of stare at a card and try to be very cognizant of what I'm giving away. Where if I'm playing against an amateur, I'm going to try to talk you into doing exactly what I'd like you to do. And I don't care what I give away.
So you went from, playing the game to being a professional or winning a lot, and then you went to being an entertainer and being on TV. How does the TV camera and the TV audience change the dynamic of the game?
No, it definitely does have a major effect. Like sometimes you're playing at the World Series of Poker and you're on one of the side tables and everyone's playing comfortably. And then they say, oh, you know what? We're moving to the TV table. And then you can start to notice that certain players will be heavily affected. I won't, because I've been on the TV table most of my career. But for others, there's an added level of shame and fear of being exposed as stupid or making a dumb play and having your friends see it. So what you'll see a lot of people do is become more timid and more careful, while others will just lose their mind and just do really dumb stuff because they're like, they're too, the lights, the cameras, the whole production, they just, they lose their mind. And again, it's always a benefit for me to be on a TV table because I'm comfortable and they're not.
What are some of the ways that poker has changed over the course of your career?
Like, I think if you look at every game, whether it's NBA, NFL, NHL, of course, it always changes. And what it does is it evolves. Poker saw a real kind of key moment when online poker became a thing. And then in addition to that, artificial intelligence and solvers. Like, chess has a chess engine where you can sort of look up a spot and the chess engine will tell you what the right play is. It knows. Mm-hmm. Well, poker has that now to a certain degree. So now you had people previously kind of having to learn by going through the motions and figuring it out on their own. So now a whole new group of people could learn. Like, for example, there's a lot of young Germans who didn't necessarily have poker talent or poker skill, but they were very good at studying. And they were studying with these solvers and became quite good at poker, that way. So the game always will evolve and change. I think now we're actually sort of seeing kind of like a full circle return to the physical aspect and tells and these types of things being more like, making a comeback, if you will, from the theoretical approach.
There's this meme that floats around, shows the basketball court, professional sports, and like where shots are taken from, and it all evened out to very specific spots, whereas before it was all over the place. Is that kind of happened to poker when people lean in too much into solvers or other kinds of strategies? It homogenizes the game and makes it easier for you to even play that knowledge against the people who are kind of bracketing themselves.
Basically whenever nerds get involved, whether it's basketball or curling or soccer, poker, they ruin it. They ruin a game because they figure stuff out. They figure out ways to like counteract. For example, I'd say in poker, one of the more prevalent things, this happened in the NBA too. In basketball, teams figured out way back when, where it's like, okay, we're up by 12 points. Well, let me just hold the ball. Okay, I'll just stand here. I won't move it, and we'll just let the clock tick off. And it's over, right? We win. Well, so what they do, they had to create rules, a shot clock rule. You got to get it over half court in 10 seconds. You get 24 seconds to shoot. We're there in poker now too, because people have learned that like just by stalling, just by sitting there and wasting time, especially in a poker tournament, that's worth actual expected value. You gain money. For example, let's say, a tournament's only going to pay 15 people. Okay. Well, there's 16 left at two tables. Okay. Well, one table's playing and, they're playing pretty fast. And the other table, people are just sitting there. So chances are someone's going to go broke on the other table, which means everyone at that table makes money. So there's always, evolutions and rules and things in order to like counteract what nerds figure out and how to ruin games. Like I think NBA, for example, with the nerds figuring out how effective 3-point shooting is, they did the math on it and they realized you should basically just always be doing that. Every time you have an open three, which as far as I was concerned, as a viewer, it's less interesting, but it's more what we call GTO, is a short form for game theory optimal. Right. And in poker, that sort of evolution of the game is what a lot of the younger players tried to aspire to be, which was game theory optimal.
And you say it's kind of taking a turn back to the physical, maybe the psychological?
A little bit. I think so, because I think ultimately what we learn is this. What artificial intelligence can do, as far as like the amount of computations it can do. The human brain is not capable of that, right? So what we do is we learn from the AI. We say, okay, well, what's the AI doing? How can I incorporate this? How can I mimic this? I think we got to a point where a lot of people realize, well, you can't, not perfectly. So you always have to do what's called exploit. I'll give you an example. You know the game rock, paper, scissors, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I wanted to be in an equilibrium where there's nothing you can do to exploit me, this is what game theory optimal is. I would throw rock, paper, and scissors exactly 33% of the time, right? If I do that, there's nothing you can do to beat me, right? But in addition to that, there's also no way for me to beat you. Because no matter what you throw, you know, I'm going to win like 1 out of 3 times or whatever the case may be. Or, you know, so one of the things you do is, let's say, for example, I knew you threw rock 10 times in a row, and I know you just throw rock every time. So what should I do then? What would you do? If you knew I threw rock every time, what would you do?
Yeah, paper.
How often?
60% of the time, just to keep you on your toes.
See, that's a smart answer. Most people get that wrong, but you get it right. So 60 is probably a little high too, but like most people say, well, 100%. It's like, well, now, if you do that, they're going to start to notice, wait a minute, he keeps throwing paper, and now they will exploit you. So this is how AI solvers, you know, computers did this to each other. They were like trying to exploit each other till they found an equilibrium. So, you know, if you upped let's say you upped paper like 40%, you're going to beat this guy, right? But they're not going to understand why. They're just going to think that you just were lucky, when in reality, you were picking up on their tendencies. That's what we call exploit style poker. So game theory optimal is throw, you know, 33 each. Exploit is look to figure out, well, what is he doing that I can exploit? But when you do that, you have to also be cognizant of the fact that, like, you're now becoming exploitable, right? Yeah. So if I start throwing, you know, paper 40% of the time, and you picked up on that, now you can throw scissors. Yeah. And, you know, so it's a constant battle of exploit.
Yeah. Do you balance the? You brought up the nerds. What would be the not nerd, I guess, in the game? The
not nerds are, frankly, and that's, I think, one of the reasons we're seeing a sort of a renaissance is a lot of the not nerds are the ones that don't use the computer solvers. They study psychology, they study people, they study physical tells, and you know, they're not handcuffed by a set of rules, you know, some principles that like hold them back from being able to do what they think is the most effective in that moment. Even if the solvers would say, this is a mistake, okay? They can look at that and say, this is a mistake, because it would be if you were playing against robots. Yeah. But you're not. You're playing against people. I'll give you another example. So let's say I was confronted with a situation where I'm playing against you, Benjamin, and the solver says I should try to bluff here, you know, 90% of the time. But I know you, okay? I know you're not going to fold. I know you have a strong hand because I've been paying attention. So instead of me doing the right thing, which is to try to bluff you, I just don't, okay? And now everybody watching, all the nerds, would be like, well, wow, he's supposed to bluff there. What a mistake. Yeah. They're not seeing the forest through the trees. Yeah. They're stuck in this formulaic idea because they're thinking in terms of robot versus robot. But we're humans, and humans will always have tendencies. And those that exploit those tendencies are the ones that have the most success.
Yeah. Are different cultures or ethnicities, do they play different? Like when you go to China or something like that, what does that tell you about like the different cultures when you interact with their high level players? Yeah.
So that's a great question, because, you know, there's a debate about, like, you know, cultures, all cultures are not equal. They're very different, you know. They focus on different, you know, sorts of things. You think of the German, right? Well, German culture is pretty logical, practical. They think in terms of their ROI, their EV, you know, very regimented. Yeah. And their study practices are going to be very regimented, right? And now you counteract that to maybe some, like, you know, sort of bohemian culture. A little more laid back, a little more relaxed, go with the flow, you know, and all that sort of stuff. Like Scandinavians, for some reason, are incredibly aggressive. They take risk. They welcome risk. They take incredible amounts of risk. And even within the U.S., you play in California versus New York. I found that in California, people played pretty reckless, pretty wild. And in New York, they were just super conservative and buttoned up. So I'm approaching the Californians. I say, okay, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that you're too loose. Whereas the New Yorkers, you're so concerned with, like, playing careful, I'm going to push you around. Okay. Well, oddly enough, you'd think you don't push the New Yorkers around, but that's kind of what you do. So yeah, different cultures. Again, like, if you grow up playing with a group of people who all sort of develop similar type strategies, it'll rub off on you. you know? And, you know, not all cultures are equally good at poker. I won't mention the ones that's worse, but it's Australia.
Really?
Yeah, for some reason, you know. And then you look at, say, for example, Vietnamese culture. They're amazing. They're really good at this stuff. You know, they're very strategically adept. They're just really sharp. And a lot of it has to do with lived experience. And a lot of it just has to do with upbringing and, you know, all types of things. But I definitely think culture, and this has nothing to do with race at all. It's cultural. Like, you know, Vietnamese and Koreans are very different in terms of how they, you know, their emotional stability at a poker table.
Yeah.
Everything's different. And it's not about race. It's just about, I think, cultural, you know, norms and upbringing.
Well, what about sex? That's biological. Or are women different than men? Do you have to play them differently?
Yeah, I think so. You know, typically you look at historically, you know, men are filled with more testosterone, right? Which means that they're more likely to be higher risk takers. They're more likely to be aggressive, more likely to take on these leadership roles and like battle. They want to battle, right? Where women don't have testosterone running through their veins, so they're less likely to want to take on risk, right? Having said that, what I found interesting about poker is the most successful women historically have been overly aggressive, like almost like compensating. Like where they're just playing really, really crazy and, you know, even more aggressive, the women at the top. And then, you know, when you look at like population, though, generally speaking, you look at a woman, you think, okay, they're going to be more timid, more careful. They're not going to bluff as much. They'll be easier to push around, all these types of things. The sharp women, the smartest ones, take that in and go, I'm going to take advantage of these dumb idiots, these dumb guys who think I'm some pushover, and I'm really going to push them around. So yeah, there's definitely that.
Yeah. How do you counter, generally speaking, a loose player as opposed to the opposite of loose? I guess the tight player.
Yeah. So a loose player is a player who's fundamentally wild and playing hands they shouldn't be, and, you know, putting in money in when they shouldn't be. So with those players, you just trap them, right? You play solid hands and you just let them hang themselves, if you will, right? You know, they're like they're the ones where you just play fundamentally solid. And just try to have the best hand against them and let them, you know, and just take advantage of them fundamentally.
And then tight player.
The tight players are the ones that you push them around, right? So in all these situations when there's like money laying out on the table, you know, like, you know, the battle for those pots where neither player has a very good hand, it's against the tighter players. Those are the ones you just aggressively just bluff them. You know, you're going to push them around because they fold too much, right? The loose player, they don't fold enough. So there's no point in trying to push them around. Let them slough off the money. It's the tight ones, the weak ones, we call them, that you pounce on them. Okay. You just take you know, it doesn't matter what your cards are. You don't care as much. You just, when they don't have a good hand and you know that, you just bet.
What happens when somebody starts pushing you around? What are your tactics to deal with that?
Well, again, similarly, even more so, actually, when people are very aggressive, that's when I really like to set traps. So situations in hands where maybe I'm supposed to raise early on in the hand, right? That's what the normal play would be. Not against this person, because I know this person, if I just call, they'll go crazy on the river and they'll bet big. So when I do have a strong hand, I will, you know, exploit them by letting them hang themselves. So in spots where they don't think I have a very, very strong hand, I'll make sure to have some very strong hands in those spots so that when they, you know, make these huge bluffs, you know, I can exploit the fact that they're playing too aggressively.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about quitting poker?
No.
Have you been tired of it? That you want to throw in the towel?
The thing is, I'm 52 now, you know, and I live a pretty balanced life. Where I golf and I don't play poker every day. You know, when I play the World Series of Poker, that's 6-7 weeks of every day, 12 hours a day. And then I won't play again for about a month or two, you know, so I look forward to it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just fast from it for a while.
Yeah. I just play golf.
Yeah. What is, well, I guess golf, you're playing against yourself. I think that's what people say, basically.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain degree, that's similarity in poker, but also, you know, golf, you can gamble against other people. And I enjoy, you know, we enjoy that, right? Yeah. So that is where, you know, pressure, and I love pressure. I love high pressure situations and performing under pressure. I do better under pressure than I do when there's not, which is the minority. I had my agent play the member guests with me a while back, and he got to be my partner, and he's like, man, I've known you 20 years. I've never seen anything like that. We're like, under the immense pressure, crazy wind. He was terrible. He couldn't he was on the water every hole. And I stepped up and just in these big pressure moments again and again and again was able to like, hit the shot.
Yeah. There's this, in your interviews, you talk about a conference or seminar you went to a long time ago that deepened your knowledge of human experience. Like it seemed like it taught you some psychological or self-centering techniques and stuff. How has that part of your life developed over the years?
The place was called Choice Center. I did it in 2013, I want to say.
Okay.
And essentially what it does is it delivers like emotional intelligence training. Okay. Like EQ. A lot of people talk about IQ as the measure of intelligence. But in fact, if let's say, for example, two people went in for a job and they're both equally IQ'd, the person with the higher EQ, the ability to relate to people, the self-awareness, they're more likely to get the job. Mm-hmm. And so the question really always is this something that can be improved and trained? And Harvard studies said yes. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways they do that is through experiential training, where you're going to be put in situations and, in group settings and one-on-one settings, and you go through all these types of things. And I would say that I still to this day use so many of the principles that I learned then, and the number one probably takeaway overarching is the difference between being a victim to a situation and being 100% responsible for the situation. Okay. Now, a lot of people get the word responsible wrong and they think fault, blame. No. A bad thing just happened. Okay. Who's responsible for how I react to that? Me, 100%. The word responsible is response-able, right? Mm-hmm. And you find there's power in that. In poker, you often have people tell these bad beat stories. That's the victim. Like, oh man, I'm so unlucky. I had aces and the guy had 9-4 and I lost. And I'm like, okay, great. Good for you. What do you want? You want like a pity party? Where's the value here? What are we learning, right? How about this? Why don't we look at the responsible side? How did you get in the situation in the first place? Okay. Did you play great? Did you make any mistakes? Let's focus on the process. Did you do everything that you possibly could in order to play your best game? Or did you make some other mistakes? Because now there's value. Once I start getting responsible, you know what? I lost the hand, but I probably could have bet bigger in this spot, and that might have changed the outcome. That might have been a better play. Now there's value, right? Because I'm looking at my situation and going, what can I learn from this? What value can I take from this? The victim mentality, and it's true in poker and life, is always just like, woe is me. Nothing is my fault. I get to blame everybody, whether it's my family, society, everyone else for all of my problems and for not me being where I want to be, rather than take responsibility. And again, like some people look at that from a political narrative too, sort of have one side as being victim and the other side being responsible, if you will. Truth is, we're all victim in different ways at times. The truly successful people are the ones who don't stay there, I'll give you an example, a silly one for me. When I used to go to Barcelona, I'm a vegan, okay? Yeah. I used to get there and I'd bitch and complain and be angry because there was nothing for me to eat, right? That's the victim mentality, right? Yeah. I knew where I was going. I knew I was going to Barcelona. Why didn't I, a month in advance, figure out where to eat and what to get and what grocery stores I could get food from, right? Who's responsible for me not having the food? Them? I could blame all them because they don't eat like I eat and they put pork in everything. Yeah. Or I could take the responsible approach and go, no. Listen, you're going to a place, you're responsible for making sure that you've done your due diligence. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lesson from that. Anytime I went anywhere in the future, I would make sure to do my research and see, okay, well, how am I going to survive out there?
You had a really long run of not getting to the top performance, and because poker is so luck based and there's all these kind of changing parameters of what you're dealing with, that could tempt you to kind of stray from being responsible because you can't be responsible for the cards. You can't be responsible for winning or losing at a high game. Was that tested over that stretch of time where you're going for the bracelet, and you kept on getting capped?
So yeah, this is exactly the difference between again, I've sort of touched on this before, those that are successful and those that aren't. Because for me, yeah, sure, I've gone through moments where it feels like the cards are spitting in my face. How is this even possible? Feels impossible when you're going through it. What that does for me though, is it makes me dig even deeper. And it makes me ask myself really important questions. Are you playing your best? If you're losing right now, is it because of luck? Or is it because of things that you're doing? And I've got 30 plus years experience to know the difference. So I have a little checklist. of things I go through in terms of like, am I doing this? Yes. Am I doing this well? Am I doing this well? Then keep doing these things and it'll turn. Right. Well, maybe there are things that I'm not doing great. Okay. Well, maybe I can improve. And I think generally speaking, and this happens to most people in life, when things are going well with whatever you're doing, you don't spend a lot of time being introspective about how to improve them because everything's fine. It's only during those breakdown moments where things are going badly that you have to ask yourself these life questions. All right, what am I going to do here? Am I going to give this my all? Am I going to look to improve, or am I done? Right. And I've always thrived with my back against the wall in those moments. And again, that's where the word resilience comes in.
Yeah. So with that 30 years of experience, how do you relay that to people? Do you teach courses? Do you take up mentorships from time to time?
In the past, I sort of did. I actually, when I completed the course, I would volunteer there and sort of try to help other people to, understand, for example, the difference between being victim responsible, to set goals, to create like a personalized, strategic plan for achieving those goals, having what I call clear intention, right? Like, I want to achieve this goal. Okay. Right. Cool. Why? That's the most important reason. What do you want this goal for? Because if it's a hard goal and you don't have a real reason why, it's very easy to just quit, Like, what's the point? So let's say, for example, someone says, I want to lose 20 pounds in the next 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is. Why do you want to lose the weight? Right. Well, because I want to be there for my kid and I feel like I'm getting out of shape and I can't play basketball with them and all these types of things. So now when times get tough, right, you have your why. Yeah. You have your why to push through the hard part, the workouts, the diet, all this type of stuff, right? And I always like to work backwards. Okay, so that's the end goal, the 20 pounds. All right, now let's create the 2-month plan. What are you going to have to do every week? Well, where are the benchmarks every month? Like, and let's say, for example, after month 1, you're off track. Okay, what do we need to adjust about the plan in order to get back on track? So I've done some public speaking for different companies and things like that and try to help people along those lines, but not something I'm doing now. I'm just, but I will for anyone that needs it.
Yeah. What is the why for poker and how's that changed over the years?
So for me, the why was, early on, I think that, the why was it satisfied like a competitive urge that I had, and I was never going to be a professional athlete. I don't have any talent or skill. But it definitely did that. Ultimately though, the why was freedom, right? So I chose poker partly because it chose me, because it's something I love, but the reason to succeed, like, because when people always say to me, like, what's your why? To make money. For what? Yeah. What do you want the money for? Right? Yeah. It's not enough to just say, I want to play poker so I can make a lot of money. Well, what do you want the money for? And for me, it was freedom to be able to just be my own boss, for one, to do whatever I wanted when I wanted, to travel if I chose to have the freedom of not feeling like I had to go to work every day, and freedom to just like choose to do whatever I'd like to do. And that was my why. I wanted to work hard in my 20s and 30s so that I don't have to in my 40s. I still choose to at times, during the World Series of Poker, but it's not something that, I don't have to go to the Bellagio right now and play poker to pay rent. Yeah.
Yeah. But once you get the freedom, then has the why shifted over the last decade or so of why push yourself?
Yeah, I'd say that's funny because I've never really had that question asked, but it's a good question and it's fair because, now I do have that freedom. So what drives me now? Well, I'm a self-motivated individual. Yeah. I love it. Whether it's legacy, whether it's, constantly being, testing myself. I've always been a believer that like, if you're not improving, you're getting worse because everyone else is. So and that's my competitive spirit. Probably ego plays a role too, to still prove to the haters and the doubters. Yeah. So there's like a self-worth conversation underneath that too. Yeah. To have some sort of drive and goal. I've always been a goal setter my whole life. That's always been something that I enjoy. I enjoy the journey. Sometimes the journey towards the goal, well, most of the time, is more rewarding than when you achieve it. You're like, all right, we've achieved that goal. Cool. What's next? I got another one. Now we got to create. Now it's golf. Like I got big golf goals. It's just about me. That's got nothing to do with anybody else, but it's fun for me.
We talked about culture and gender and how poker is different for different cultures, different people. What about generationally? Has there been, do you understand, I guess we call them boomers. I don't mean that in a negative sense. It can be used, but like, is there something different about boomers, Gen Xers, and the millennial kids and their ethos?
Yes. So I would say, and this, people have said this before. People always think that, the generation after them is like softer than the one before. And the reason they think that is because it's true. Okay. It's absolutely true. Now, you think of like what kids deal with today in terms of instant gratification. Think about like, I don't know, how old are you?
50.
Okay. So you're 50. So you remember, like, you want to watch a movie, right? So you get in the car, you go to Blockbuster and you see all these different labels. You got to figure it out. You got to pick one. Then you got to drive home. Then you got to hold it for 3 days. Then you got to bring it back. So there was a whole buffer of process, right?
Yeah.
Kids today go like this. Press a button, they have a movie. Everything's instant gratification, right? So the difference is, I think like boomers, if you will, they'd see a mountain and say, I want to be on the top of the mountain. And then realize, I'm going to have to climb that mountain. And it's going to be hard. The younger generation just wants to like be at the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Now,
send a drone
without actually going through the process, right? And then, I think that creates, and it's through no fault of their own. Technology's made their lives easier in so many ways. It's so much easier to play victim. And have sort of a victim mentality where woe is me, because there isn't as much of a, I guess a culture of hard work being required. And that's a danger, I think, for this generation in so many ways, because of automation, because of AI, like for even, studying. You can ask Grok or you can ask AI, any question you want, and it gives you the answer. You don't have to go to the library and find the right encyclopedia and, do that sort of hard work. And so, it's obviously benefits society in so many ways, but it also has created an obstacle, I think, for younger people in terms of purpose, and also just that cultural, understanding of like hard work has value.
Yeah. How does that show up at the poker table?
Oddly enough, I would say that poker isn't in a lot of ways, poker mirrors life, but I wouldn't say necessarily in this one it does. I'd say the difference is this. In my day, okay, if I want to learn how to play poker, I had to go play poker, sit my ass on that chair with my pen and paper later, writing notes and all this sort of stuff, try to learn. Nobody was teaching me how to play. Today, you're a young kid. Oh, you have access to this AI. You have access to these solvers. You can watch people stream. You have all these instructional videos and all these sort of things. So the way in which you learn has changed. And I'd say that I think, not all, but some of the younger generation scoff at like the older generations. Like, oh, they sucked. They were terrible. I'm like, yeah, what? How do you think you would have done if you went back to 1995 and you didn't have access to all this stuff? Like Bobby Fischer actually said this with chess. People compare, chess players of today to the chess players of 1910. And he's like, well, of course, the players of today would beat them, but that's only because of the resources that they have, not because they were sharper or any better. Doyle Brunson, literally before computers were a thing, he wanted to know what was better, ace, king, or a pair of fives, right? Well, now you can just punch that into a computer. It'll give you the simulation to tell you. He took a pen and paper and just dealt out pair of fives or ace, like hundreds of times, and sort of kept track of the percentages through pen and paper. He was like a solver before solvers existed. So I have a lot of respect and admiration for those that came before me, while at the same time understanding that the tools that these young kids use today will make them sharper and better. But there's a lack of wisdom that they don't get to think about the game the same way we did, which is to just figure stuff out. It's already figured out for them. So there's like there's some detriment there, I think, in not being able to think for themselves.
How do you exploit that? I'm sure it's depending on.
I exploit that big time by the way I exploit that is this. So we talked about game theory optimal, right?
Yeah.
So game theory optimal is this perfect robot I couldn't beat. If I played against this robot online, I have no chance to win. So what happens is these kids all try to emulate, or they try to mimic what this thing's doing, but they're not doing it right. Okay, they're making mistakes. So my job is to figure out how are they misapplying what they're learning in certain situations that I can take advantage of. And there's lots of them, the ways, because they might look at a solver output, okay? And this might get too, pokery, but nerdy. They might look at, okay, on the flop, the solver says, I should do this, I should call. But the only reason the solver can do that is because the turn card and the river card, it's going to play perfectly. on both of those cards.
Yeah.
You're not. You will not. The game tree is too complex by the turn of the river. So even though the solver says, this has an EV of like 10% to call, it doesn't for you, because it's assuming that you're going to play perfectly on turn of river, which you're not. Mm-hmm. And so subtle things like that, and just seeing how people are applying game theory optimal concepts, and ways in which it's not quite optimal.
How do you, in a tournament or something, do you ever like pick up like this is somebody you never meet before? They show you that they're really good. Like that's a thorn in my side. Does that happen because you're paying attention to people, like raw talent? Like, is there a way that you could describe like what raw talent appears to be?
There is something to be said about it. Table presence. You can just tell sometimes when someone sits, whether you know them or not, like how perceptive they are, their posture, their demeanor, how confident they are, how distracted they are, and then early on, just strategically watching in ways in which they play their hands and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's no question. There's always going to be people like that, and that's the frustrating but fun puzzle, right? So I don't know this guy, but what makes this guy tick? This is harder. Okay, he's got stuff. So I might give this person a little more attention than others, because I'm trying to figure out what the heck's he doing over here. Yeah. And that's kind of like what makes the game fun for me, though. If I got to play with just 8 people who were terrible all the time, I'd win, but it wouldn't be all that fulfilling.
Yeah. What was the moment that you fell in love with poker? Was it just when did it click for you, or what did it announce to you?
For me, as a teenager, when I used to play pool, we played snooker, and we sometimes we go play these poker games at a friend's house or something after, and I didn't know anything about it. I'd bring my $10 and a 6-pack of beer, lose my $10 and be like, whatever. And not till about a month in did I notice, okay, well, you know what? I thought this game was all luck, but the same guys seems to keep winning. So once I realized that, wait a minute, there's skill here, there's strategy, there's psychology. Now I was intrigued, to actually realize, once I realized it's a game you could win at, and if you were smarter than your opponents. And that took about a month of losing, where I'm watching the same guys winning, and then I started to figure out, then it became a puzzle. Why is this guy winning? Well, I noticed, he doesn't always play every hand. He folds sometimes. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. Collect ideas. And the more ideas I collected, the more I realized, there's skill here.
Yeah. What's the worst poker movie? And has it had a detrimental effect on the game? Has there been a piece of media that's
Well, there were a couple poker movies that didn't quite hit the way we would have hoped. Lucky You, I think, went with it should have gone with it tried to become a romance and love story, but I don't think that worked. Instead of just being like a guys movie that is about gambling and crazy bets and that sort of thing. So I think trying to tell both stories hurt that one. There's another one I didn't see, but I heard it wasn't very good. It was called Runner. It was sort of about, online poker in the Bahamas. Yeah, but it was, I don't know. I don't know that one works. But I never watched that one. So I haven't seen all the poker movies, but I got to remind myself too, because for me, when I was young, I watched Cincinnati Kid, which I liked. And then Rounders, of course. Whenever that's on TV, I watch that.
Yeah, yeah. Was there, when you were first studying, was there a book or somebody that was kind of your mentor, even if not directly, but you absorbed a lot of knowledge from them?
Yeah. The first book I read, I just went to a library and looked, because I was like, this is when I started playing poker. I saw a book and it was like, King 7 offsuit, you don't play that hand? And it was just the most basic epiphanies. I don't even remember the name of the book. It didn't matter. But as far as mentors go, I had many. They didn't know they were my mentors. I chose them. Like I said, I would watch a guy who was a winner, and I knew he was, and I would study that person for an entire week, and just I would set my chips like they do, try to think like they do. Kind of do you remember the show Heroes on NBC?
Yeah.
So there was this one character who had a superpower, which was he could go in and take the superpower of another person by ripping their brain out and then leave them for dust, then move on and become super powerful. And that's kind of what I would do. I'd say, okay, what makes this guy successful? And use those things, and then I'd move on to the next person. And throughout my career, I still to this day, when I see things I like maybe 2-3 years ago, I saw some things the Brazilian players were doing, and I'm like, ooh, I like this a lot. So then I'll just, steal it, if you will. As far as
what were they doing? That was
they were using smaller bet sizes in really unique spots. They were leveraging what we call range advantage by re-raising more often, but for smaller amounts.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me of kind of my youth and the games that I'd played and some of the things that were really successful for me. And I started to incorporate that, and and then it really felt good, like when I tried it on. So I credit them for being the first to figure that out.
What do you think you added to the game when you first broke out, when you first went pro?
Well, I think people started to, because like I said, I took a lot from a lot of people, and one of the things that I sort of coined was a small ball approach. Okay. Which was a lot more like, if I was going to use a basketball analogy, of me like throwing a ton of little jabs, just a ton, but just persistently bothering you, and then waiting for you to just put your guard down, and then boom. But the entire time my guard was up, right? Yeah. So I'm protected, I'm careful, but I'm involved. I'm involved a lot, but I'm not really doing much except for waiting for that moment for the big knockout punch.
Yeah.
And so what I noticed was, like with bet sizing and things like that, I developed much smaller sizes than everyone else. And that became the norm now, to the extreme. They've taken it a step further. But when I was doing it during that era, I was mocked for it, right? People thought, this is terrible, this is bad, but I knew what I was doing. And then later, when solvers became a thing, they confirmed that I was right all along. Like, they basically figured out that what I was doing was correct well before its time.
How did you come up with that idea? Well, you said it fit?
I watched a couple players. Again, one was Neil Furlong, and another one was Alan Gehring, who were sort of using this type of strategy. So I realized, wow, this is really good. So what I learned was, and I get the analogy I would use, I think I used it in one of my books, is say there's $100 in the pot, right? And you want to steal this pot, okay? If you bet $80, you'll steal it, right? What if you bet $60? You'll probably steal it too, because your opponents won't play that differently for 60 versus 80.
Yeah. Okay.
So instead of wasting the 80, let's say my attempt to steal the car, or like, basically if you go to buy a used car and the sticker price is 10,000, and you could just pay the 10,000, or you could try to pay 6 or 7. If you're able to get the car for 6 or 7, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
So what I was doing was I was saving money. I was saving chips by using numbers that didn't affect what they would do, right? So let's say you had $100 in your big blind. Well, back then people would bet $300 or $400 to steal it. What if I bet $250? Wow, that still works because it didn't change how they played. So why am I wasting the $300-400 when I could just do $250? So it was essentially learning, what is the lowest price I can pay here to steal these chips from my opponents? And then, that was the basic crux of it.
Yeah. Why did people mock you?
And then what it did, because they didn't understand it.
Oh.
They just thought it was like, oh, you're betting like a little wimp.
Okay.
They didn't. But the truth is, they didn't realize that they weren't adapting to it anyway. So it was incredibly effective. To the point where it's like, now the people have gone even more extreme with that strategy.
Yeah.
Like solvers have gone to a next level. Like back in my day, no one in history ever bet after the flop less than half the pot. No one did.
Okay.
Now it's very common for people to bet 10%, 20%, 25% of the pot after the flop.
To obfuscate what they have, or to
well, there's a deeper reason,
value.
But generally speaking, there's situations where you should be betting often, and when you do, your opponent just kind of has to fold most of the time anyway.
Yeah.
So there's no point in betting big. You're going to be betting. So, like for example, there's certain spots we call, which is a range bet. You bet no matter what. Well, when you bet no matter what, you don't need to bet big on these boards. Let's say, for example, I'll give you a little poker example. I raised and you called in the blind, and the flop was ace 3-3. Okay, you check. Well, I'm all basically like, theory says I'm always going to bet here. But if you don't have an ace or a 3, you're just going to fold, right? Most likely. So it doesn't matter how much I bet. So why would I waste 50% of the pot or 75% so that when you do have an ace or a 3, I lose those chips, or I can just bet really small. And then, I get you to fold a lot of the junk hands. So it's made the game more complex, but I like it because it's a lot more fun for me.
How was this past World Series of Poker for you? What were some of the standout moments or players?
Oh, it was great for me. I won it was one of my best summers I've had. I was able to win the $100,000 buy-in pot limit Omaha for my 8th World Series of Poker bracelet. I ended up, we also do a fantasy draft. Myself and my friend Josh were partners this year, and we drafted each other, and we ended up winning that for, pretty close to $1 million. So it was a successful summer. Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and had good success.
Was there a strategy that you dedicated yourself to going in when you studied for it and got ready for it?
Well, I think I went in this year really easygoing, and just because it's a long grind. It's like 7 weeks, so you're constantly in a battle with your body and your mind.
Yeah. So
I just told myself, going in, I went in with the theory of just like, don't feel like I have to play every event. Take time, take breaks. Enjoy the process more so than maybe I have in past years. If I want to have a couple of drinks, have a couple glasses of wine late at night, do that. In the past I was incredibly regimented, wouldn't allow myself that sort of freedom. But I think like that sort of relaxed approach had my stress levels lower, and I had some good fortune and just felt, I really just went in like saying, just enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you enjoy it, you're going to probably play better.
There's an aspect of fate to the game that would make somebody superstitious, because you have fortune and the gods are smiling on you or whatnot. Do you have like a kind of conspiracy theory level or like a religious level to like the breaks, the good, the bad, stuff like that?
So as poker players, the goal is to really not be superstitious, but inevitably we end up being superstitious, with the dumbest things. Like, for example, one time I was playing at Bellagio and, I had put cash, I played with poker chips and cash on the table, and I'd won every day. And then the 8th day, I played and I didn't put cash on the table. And my Vietnamese friend, Scotty, goes, "You know why you lost today, baby?" He's like, "Because you didn't have the cash on the table." It's absolutely insane. It's a dumb thought, but now it's in my head.
Yeah.
So my next time going to play, what am I going to do? I'm like, it's subtle, but I'm like, I don't know, put the cash on the table, see what happens. Right.
Yeah.
Another thing, I don't know, gamblers and I still have this thing with $50 bills. I don't want any $50 bills. They feel completely useless to me. And they're unlucky, according to most poker players. But you might as well have a $57 bill. What do we need a 50 for? We've got 20s, 10s, 5s, and 100s.
Yeah.
You need a 50? What? Why? For what? So, we have all these dumb kind of superstitions, but the goal is to really kind of not allow your brain to focus on them too much, because that's just taking away from you focusing on what you need to be focusing on.
Who are your favorite people to play against?
There's a wide variety of people, but I enjoy, personally, I like playing with a guy named Phil Hellmuth, who's insane. He has an amazingly insane ego.
Yeah.
Okay. But he gets really mad when he loses, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
So I just enjoy listening to this insane banter. He's just constantly bragging, and then if he's sometimes demeaning, and I don't like when he's like that with people. But he's fun. I always mock him because it drives him nuts. But
do you think he enjoys playing with you?
Not as much, probably. He doesn't like being challenged. He likes everyone to say, "I'm the great." He wants everyone to believe he's the greatest player in the world of all time, whatever. And I don't say that, so that bothers him.
Yeah,
and gets under his skin for sure.
Is that his character, or is his character? Is that a character he plays, or is that who he is?
No, I think he's just narcissistic, but he's one of those narcissistic people. I enjoy narcissistic people. I find them fascinating, but he's also got a really big heart, and he's like a good person. He's just incredibly insecure, right? So narcissistic people run the gamut, and his narcissism comes from his insecurity. He needs everyone to know at all times how great he is, to feel like he belongs, or whatever the case may be.
It's interesting because there are horror stories or tragedies of different players who had really tough breaks and kind of burnt out, but he sticks around. So there's something solid about him, even if he's kind of unstable on one level, but he's really dedicated, really committed.
Well, he cares and tries as hard or harder than everybody. Now, he's here. The biggest problem for him, because of his narcissism and his delusions of grandeur, is he won't allow himself to ever acknowledge or admit that there might be some stuff these young kids know that he does not, right? So the toolkit that he has is limited to what worked many years ago that isn't as effective now. Like he doesn't play the highest level tournaments. He should because he can afford it, but I don't know if it's fear or whatever. He's not going to do as well against really seasoned young players who, and I try to tell him this. I said, Phil, listen, I'm 52, you're 63. You know how delusional it is to think that we're better than kids that are like spending 14 hours a day studying and playing every day like we did when we were younger. You know, I mean, I can still compete. He can compete, but it's kind of, you wouldn't hear that in many other endeavors where he still believes that, but he needs to. He hangs on to this thing because it's too much. It's frankly too much, plays too big a role in his identity or how he views himself.
Have there been players that you fear, and how did you overcome that? Or what does that, if you have a sense of fear or trepidation playing with somebody, what does that tell you about yourself?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I would use specifically the word fear, but there's definitely like a healthy, respect for, you like being concerned about a player and like what they're going to do and like not wanting them at your table because it really cramps your style or causes you issues. Like, they're very difficult to play against. They're going to put you in tough spots and they're going to create some anxious moments for you where you're unsure, right? The definition really of like a player that's you don't want is one that you can't figure out. You don't really know what they got. So when they make these big bets, you don't have, you're going to be doing a lot of guessing. Those are not the kind of players you want to play against. But fear, I wouldn't say that. Because I enjoy a challenge. I enjoy a challenge. So it sometimes it makes me rise up as well. Yeah. Like when I have players like that at the table and I realize like, okay, you need to focus harder now. So do it.
Yeah. It's like the windy golf day.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where you dial it in. What's the latest trend in the poker culture? You already mentioned it getting more physical. I'm just wondering, to wrap up the interview, like where is it headed? Is there like signs of wind shifting?
Well, as far as the way the game's going, I do think that, like I said, I think it's funny because it's only recent, maybe in the last year or year and a half. A couple of the best players or the ones that have had the most success right now, they're not built like the kids. They're not. They're like old school, kind of like a guy like Bryn Kenny, who's number one on the all-time money list, over 90 million. Jesse Lonis. These guys are not guys who spend any time at all studying with computers and using solvers at all, right? And they're at the peak. So I think what's happening is a lot of those that scoffed at it for a long time and thought, well, they're not good. They can't be good. They're just lucky. Are starting to realize, wait a minute, maybe there's more to this game. So I already think we're starting to see that. You're starting to see like at the higher levels, people trying to conceal their tells even more, wearing scarves, sunglasses, big hoodies, that sort of thing. And that's not necessarily like a good evolution for poker. I think we might actually need to make.
It seems kind of cowardly, but there's no honor among thieves, so why would they care?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like the bottom line is this, right? I'm putting up my money. You're putting up your money. You have a right. We're playing for money, right? You have every right to conceal your tells as long as it's within the rules. If the rules are I can cover my face and wear a hat, and I want to, I should be able to do it unless we change the rules. So I think we're getting to that point where currently at the World Series, well, there's three main areas people cover: their neck, their mouth, and their eyes. So at the World Series, the rule is you can only cover two of the three.
Oh.
Yeah. But still people, push the envelope with that rule and often cover all three. But for personally, I think it should be just one.
You can cover one.
Not all three.
Yeah. Why
just
the neck?
One, yeah. The neck is pulse related.
Yeah.
Right. So typically what you'll see is like, say, a big situation comes up and you put all your money in, a lot of people, their pulse is going to pulsate pretty heavily. Right. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean they're strong or weak, but what you'll notice is if you wait 2 minutes, okay, and you notice the pulse is still doing that at a very high rate, they're still uncomfortable. Okay. Why are they uncomfortable? Because they're afraid they don't have a good hand. If they were comfortable and they had a good hand, the instant rush of going all in after 30 to 45 seconds dissipates. Yeah. So a lot of people like to cover their neck so you can't see, that specific thing.
Do you notice that? I guess
I was never a big neck tell guy.
Okay.
I know there were some people who really spent a lot of time on that. I look at very different things. Yeah. But
What's your range of observation for the other people? I guess you've developed a history with them, a story, but like in the presence.
Yeah, eyes, mouth, posture, and the way in which they're betting their chips and things like that. Again, every human is different.
Yeah.
So what you pick up on, but you will find ultimately that there's some sort of universal truths. In general, right? Like if you're bluffing and you're lying, right? What's most likely to happen? You're going to be comfortable and laid back and easygoing, or you're going to be more tense in this. So the idea is, if I'm bluffing, I don't want anyone looking at me. I don't want to give away anything, so I'm going to curl up into a little ball if I can and do that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I have the best hand, I'm like, well, whatever, do what you got to do. You maybe even lean back in your chair and stuff like that. So that's like a basic, fundamental, universal truth in poker and in life. Mm-hmm. Like, when people lie, they're far less likely to look you in the eyes when they're doing it. They're like, oh yeah, I know, I saw him yesterday. Where they don't look in your eyes.
How does a professional poker like make money off of lying and not become a liar?
Well, because it's not lying per se; it's deception, right? It's a game of it's a strategy based game. Mm. Doesn't mean you're dishonest. That's probably one of the biggest misnomers people have about poker players. Like, well, they make a living out of lying, but they're not. They're bluffing. They're playing a strategic game. So it doesn't mean that they're dishonest people away from the table. In fact, I would say that poker players, to a man, I would trust far more than I would like people in the corporate world, the business world, to be, to be honorable. Like, for example, in poker, borrowing and lending money is very prevalent. You might lend a guy $20,000-$30,000, no contract to sign, no thing. You do that in the corporate world, you're way more likely to get robbed than you would be a poker player, because part of that is, they want to continue playing poker, and word of mouth spreads. You don't pay this guy $30,000, starts to get out. Yeah. So there is, I think, probably a big disconnect in terms of people seeing bluffing as lying. It's not a lie. You're not telling a lie. You're just betting. You're betting. You're looking at a situation. You're looking at the mathematic probabilities. You're deciding that, okay, well, I need to win those chips, so I think that I can apply pressure. It's not like a story you told that's completely fabricated.
Yeah. And what about the gambling? Like, gambling's according to certain religious scholars or cultures, gambling's a big no-no. What's the relationship to gambling and morality? And I know it's within the game. It's not immoral if the game is set up to play that, but there are these ways that it preys upon our more negative natures. I'm wondering how you navigate that.
Well, we sort of touched on it earlier, but it's true. Like, poker does, people that have like sort of, let's say, for example, gambling addiction, they typically aren't drawn to poker. It's too slow. It's too strategic. They are instant gratification. Like someone who has a problem with gambling is way more likely to play slots or blackjack or something like that at the casino than they would play poker, because poker is a game sort of wits, and it's, along those lines. As far as
you get punished if you let that take over, if you let your gambling addiction, so-called, take over, you get punished in poker.
Like it's a self-weeding endeavor, because once you lose all your money, you can't play no more.
Yeah,
what I mean? You're done. Like, but I don't know that poker has like. I think in fact, if I were to like suggest young people learn how to play, for not necessarily about the money, but the vast strategic aspect of the game, whether it's the psychological, there's math, there's psychology, there's a whole bunch of really cool things you can learn via playing poker that expand beyond chess. Chess is a great little game for kids to learn, to play strategy, but poker, now you're looking at more than just, specific, strategy. Now you're thinking about, well, like, I want a balderdash. Isn't there bluffing in that game? There's a whole bunch of board games where like bluffing exists. And differentiating that, like, to what you said, when it's within the rules of the confined game, there's no moral issue with me, like, you bet your money and I raise you on the river and I bluff you. I don't feel bad about that. If you go broke and you lose all the money, if I feel bad for you, maybe I'll buy you a beer later, I'll buy you dinner. Yeah. But that's the game. That's the life we chose. Yeah. I'm not out there taking Aunt Benny's last pension check. Yeah. I'm playing against other killers who are all in the same boat. We're trying to, we're all wolves and we're all lions trying to, get what's left of the carcass.
How is poker and your experience, 30 years experience of poker, how do you think that's going to translate into fatherhood? What do you think you're going to bring?
Oh, I think actually quite well, frankly, for a lot of reasons. Number one, patience. Like you sit at a poker table, sometimes you just sit there and you fold 45 minutes to an hour. So patience is something that you need to develop. Also just, the freedom that I actually tried to achieve. I can be a stay-at-home dad, and I can spend as much time as I want instilling good values. Like as far as my wife and I talk about this, like she's all about the nursery and the baby stuff. I'm like, let me know when it can swing the club, but I think I'll be uniquely well suited to being a dad, because of my goal setting background. And I think I know how to inspire, a young kid, and I want to set them up with good values and beliefs and again, focusing on being responsible rather than a victim. I mean, a kid is going to be a victim, but teaching them how to harness like responsibility and teaching that that's where all the power is. I think I'm going to be all right.
I guess it's off season for you right now for poker, but what's coming up next for you? You're just playing golf? Do you have any big tours or something?
Well, for now, I'm going to be going to Montreal to support an event there. There's a circuit event, at the playground in Montreal. And then I'm going to be probably doing a little bit online. And then not till December. December is the big one. December is the year-end World Series of Poker where I'll be vying for Player of the Year. Currently in the running. So
how's that decided? Just chips?
No, it's a point system throughout the year. So it started in Prague and then the World Series in Vegas and it finishes in Bahamas. And so I'm in the top 5 or 6 right now. So Bahamas will elect the winner. I've won it twice already, Player of the Year. So this will be my 3rd.
That's is that luck or not?
No, that's actually the furthest thing from luck because it's like, so look at it this way, right? We're grading you not on one tournament, right? Just like, oh, you won that one. It's on the whole year's worth. Who performed the best consistently throughout the entire year over tournament. And you accumulate points for each one. Similar to like, what you'd see in the FedEx Cup with golf or, in tennis with rankings and things like that.
Yeah. That's amazing. Different sports have different age ranges, but I guess poker you can be pretty old, like because your brain probably doesn't fall apart like your knee joints do. What keeps you on top? Like why do you think you're in that top 5%? Well, top 1% of the world, but like those final runoffs.
Well, because I mean, like I said, I'm a self-made motivated kind of person, and I just have that. I have that dog in me. We talked about it with golf, me and my buddy Josh. And like some people, they just don't have that dog in them. Good people, nice people, but there's some people that like have that competitive urge, that competitive edge, that just killer instinct to just do it. And I've got it. Like if you put a 12-foot putt and just say like, here, I'll bet you $1 million you don't make it. I'm going to make that putt. I'm going to do it. I'm an underdog, right? Even the pros don't make it half time, but I would bet my money that when push comes to shove, I just got a lot of confidence in the fact that I'll be able to figure it out.
Daniel, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk with me. I'm a huge fan, and it's just been great to talk to you.
It was a pleasure, as always.